direction. Teams and WebEx, but also using virtual public engagement tools. So we wanted to make sure that this draft plan reflected all the new ways, the new tools and methods we have now that we had dabbled in before COVID, but now we really rely on a whole lot to make sure that we reach people where they are. We are also, the agency since 2019 has also really pivoted towards more equitable engagement. So we've got a whole program and project at the agency called our Community Alliance for Regional Equity, where we are pulling in community organizations, paying them $10,000 of unrestricted funds as an honorarium to also help guide us. So just as government agencies like ours pay consultants for engineering services or financial services, we are paying community organizations for their lived experience, their expertise in their communities. So we've piloted that program this year. We wanted this plan to make sure and mention and put into context what the CARE cohort is going to be offering to enhance our public engagement. And as an aside, as far as we know, we're the first kind of metropolitan planning organization that has figured out how to compensate community organizations in this unrestricted way, $10,000 a year. And the CARE participants, these 12 community organizations, come to us every month, spend about half a day here, and we test the water. We're taking their temperature on a whole lot of projects that we're working on and getting their best ideas for, again, approach improvements, what we need to know, who we need to know. Did you have a question?
Sure. When you say things, sometimes sparks, when you said CARE cohort, when I hear CARE, I think of the Relief Act. Is it related to that?
It's our acronym. And thank you for pulling me up short on that, Thomas. It's the Community Alliance for Regional Equity. And I will not use the acronyms because I forget.
Well, don't worry. I have other questions.
Yes.
That's good.
So when I say CARE, it's our Community Alliance for Regional Equity. And they've met for most of this year. And we hope that this initial cohort stays with us. This is a whole nother agenda item. We can talk about it another time, but it's mentioned in the draft public participation plan. So I wanted to be sure to mention. It's also one of the things we've added to our public engagement since 2019. That's turned out to be really important to us, really invaluable. And the other thing that we're trying to do here with this draft public engagement plan, as I mentioned, is not just inform the public about all the opportunities and how to get involved and where are the ends, where are the levers within CMAP, Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, but also to guide staff into understanding what they have, what the tools are, what's the array of things that they can use to do public engagement.
Could you possibly share with us who those players are and what they what their individual focus, the individual people who are part of that?
Of the CARE cohort?
Right, correct.
I don't have my laptop in front of me, but Sema, maybe you could pull up from our website.
I think would be helpful to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who those groups are and what they each focus on.
And an interesting, important thing to know is that we've just opened applications. We're looking for 5 more organizations to join this cohort. We're hoping for more organizations from the collar counties for it. But again, we're looking for 5 more, and we can for sure follow up and send you more information about this program. If you know any community organizations that are close to and understand marginalized communities, disinvested communities, we'd like for them to apply. And it's a simple application process, and there'll be a meeting, kind of an interview process, and then bring them on board. So we'll share more information with you about CARE. And
who makes the determination as to who's in and who's out, so to speak?
We have an internal committee of staff who are on the project that do all the interviews. We go out and meet in person with everyone. So these are the groups. Access Living is more of a regional for people with disabilities. Let's see, we'll go back. Wi-Fi is a little pokey in this room. Yeah. Access Living Alliance of the Southeast is Southeast Cook County. Alliance to End Homelessness in Suburban Cook County. They're based in the near west, but they obviously are Cook County based. Batavia Community Diversity Initiative is a Kane County based organization. Elgin Community Bikes is kind of Kane, mostly Kane County. Think a little bit of Will County. Evanston North Shore NAACP is Cook County. Faith in Place is again another regional, but I think they're mostly south suburbs. The Far South Community Development Corporation is Far South Cook County. Hanoa Family Alliance is kind of the, I want to say, north end of Chicago that serves immigrant families, primarily Asian immigrant families, Korean. North Lawndale Community Coordinating Council is based mostly in, I think, Belmont Cragen, serving a largely Hispanic community. Same with the Northwest Center. Sorry, not North Lawndale. North Lawndale is on the near west side. I'm thinking Northwest Center, which is north side. And then Palenque, LSNA is also serving a largely Latino Hispanic community on the northwest side of Chicago. So that's this 2023 cohort. We're looking to add 5 more organizations to this. Applications have just opened and the decisions will be made before the end of 2023 so that those 5 new groups can join the 2024 program.
And what are the criteria for people becoming a member of the cohort?
It's pretty simple. You have to serve a community that has been historically disinvested or marginalized communities. So those that are not largely represented in regional planning processes. I think you have to be a 501c3 or at least have a fiduciary agent, right? So you don't have to be all that organized, but something so that we can pay you the $10,000. In the 7 county regions, so we had an applicant, I think, from Northern Indiana last year that was technically not qualified, even though they served residents across the border based in the 7 counties is a requirement. And it's a very simple application. We're not looking for the application itself to be a barrier to participating in the program.
That's it. Do you have a question?
What is the outreach like for this? How do organizations, how are they notified of this? Do they have to search for it on the website or is there like advertising or like?
Last year, we did a big blast to recruit organizations to apply for the program. So we had several dozen applicants for the program. We interviewed each one of the applicants. We were gonna, as long as they were, minimally qualified. This year, because we're focusing more on the collar counties. As you can tell, we just had Elgin, Batavia, Evanston is still kind of Cook County. So we were looking at Will County, McHenry, Lake County organizations. Kane County, we've got Batavia kind of there in Elgin, but looking for some of the collar counties to help round out this cohort. So we can share the information with you, Tessa, and if you would share it with any organizations that you think would be eligible or interested. And the requirement really is a meeting a month. So to help guide this agency on what it does. Yeah.
Curious, what is the funding source?
Sorry, can you repeat? What is
the funding source? I should know this. I think we started out with a philanthropic grant that got the program development started. The hard part, because we are federally funded, was making it okay for federal funds to be used for essentially honoraria for community organizations. But I don't know. I'll have to follow up because I think it may have changed since last I knew what the funding source was. Yeah. Questions? We'll do a follow-up email with more information about the program and answer your question. And we would be happy to include a briefing on the program at your December meeting too, so you can understand who the new organizations will be and where we're going with the second year of the program in perspective. So back to the, thank you for your questions. Any more as they occur to you, please chime in. The business of the public participation plan, again, the difference is from 2019 to now is we wanted to include things that we've learned since 2019, new tools and methods that we've added. And then we wanted to make sure that there was a big dose of guiding staff, but mostly guiding the public on where the ins are to the agency. And we also, the last time we did a public participation plan, the Citizens Advisory Committee had a big role in reviewing the plan, taking a look at the early draft, just as we've offered to you today. And then if you're able to meet in December, we would love to bring back to you kind of the final version of the plan. So the plan, the draft that you have here is not a final plan. The public comment period, we have a mandatory 45-day public comment period that will begin in a couple of weeks. We'll put it out there for the public for comment. We've already gotten comments from the Regional Transportation Authority. We've gotten comments from folks in our agency. You're taking a look at it as well. Happy to discuss it. And then there will be, it goes next to our Transportation Committee in November. From there, then we should have a final draft for you to review. The final draft will be a more designed version. So what you have now is a Word document with some graphics added. The final version will be not a Word doc. It'll be a little more designed. So it's a little more accessible with some more graphics and things like that for our audiences. Right, exactly. Thomas added ADA accessible and whatnot. Yes. So that's the plan for the chronology of getting this public participation plan to its ultimate approver, which will be our MPO policy committee, which meets in January. So anything having to do with CMAP as a metropolitan planning organization has to be approved by our policy committee. They meet in October, but that agenda was packed full with another big project the agency has. So we put it off until January. Gives us a little more time for the public comment and to make revisions to it. So what we're asking today is for you to preliminarily approve a draft of this. So if you have any comments, please share them. We will incorporate them as best we can. If you have no comments, that's fine too. We just didn't want it to get to the next step without this committee at least taking a look at it. So what you would be approving is a draft of this public participation plan. We'd be making more revisions to it and then hopefully getting you that final version with everybody's comments in December.
Are there some examples of some things that have been used by other MPOs around the country that have some, ideas that might be drawn upon?
Yeah, that was part of the due diligence, Mr. Chair, when we started looking back at our 2019 to see how we wanted to revise and improve. It was looking at other MPOs, metropolitan planning organizations, public participation plans. The one that I really liked was the one from, I think, the Sacramento area Council of Governments, which was a very user-friendly, colorful guide. So you could open it up as a member of the public and right away see, how do I attend a committee? How do I chime in on updates to the transportation improvement program? So it was really a one-stop guide to the public on how to get involved and how to be heard in these regional planning processes. So that was the one that I really liked. There were some that are more formulaic. They're obviously just checking the box. Federal government requires this, 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 and this. That part looks more like the appendix to this. So it's just a recitation of all the applicable regulations.
Are there any examples of any, unique tools that some of the other MPOs may have used for reach into the communities?
Yes, and we added some of those to, at the very end, kind of the list of, I think there's a list of tools and methods for it. It's an appendix, maybe.
Appendix D.
Yes, the appendix D,
D.
tools and methods. And so what we tried to do in our scan of other metropolitan planning organizations is look to all the different, the whole menu of ways in which organizations, government organizations do meaningful and inclusive public engagement. We put these tools and methods into the spectrum of public participation. So for the level of engagement, are you looking to inform the public, consult with them, involve them, or collaborate with them? And which tools would you use for different levels of involvement and engagement? Some of the more interesting and innovative tools actually we use. And a good example would be, and we can give you a link to this too, is that on a couple of our planning projects for Logan Square and for what was the other one? At the Avondale project, we've done a couple of planning projects in these two Chicago neighborhoods and developed a magazine, a small zine, call it, which is a pictorial, like a graphic novel of the planning process, and use that to tell the story about the planning process and how it connects to people's lives, and got really extraordinary responses from the community using this almost like a graphic novel. And we'd be happy to send you a link to these zines for the Logan Square or the Avondale projects that we used. They were so effective, we think that it'll get a lot of play in other projects too, especially with our youth engagement. It was the youth that really connected with these zines.
Other does anybody else have specific questions that they'd like to pose?
The draft, that's because there's going to be more development.
Yeah.
And
Just want to, I think we're just looking for reassurance that we're kind of in the right direction on this. And if you had anything and Jessica, if you have other ideas that occur to you once the meeting has concluded, please email one of us, and that counts as your contribution, your public comment on this plan. So understood that you may not have had a chance to digest the whole thing for today's meeting. But just taking a look at this, is it outlined in a way that looks like it would speak to our audiences more than just complying with the federal regulations and what FHWA expects of us, but rather, is it a useful tool for the public and for CMAP staff?
Considering that the tools are obviously a vital part of the process, I think it might be helpful to put some more meat on the bone, so to speak, on these tools. So that people would have a better understanding of how to utilize different tools or what they are, as opposed to just, listing the individual things.
So you mean if this was if this was a PDF,
Like
having the
clickable.
link to, well, this is what
Uh-huh.
the Sacramento community did. The link, the hyperlink to, oh, this is what the Twin Cities Regional Council's done with regard to outreach on this specific issue, something
Yeah,
like
I think that would be great. And so, I mean, similarly linked to things that can be utilized. For example, when we did the last Zoom meeting, when we did the
transit.
the transit input and so forth, a link to that particular type of concept, so people could see, oh, this is a great tool, something we could use to try and reach out as well.
Could we do it like an example? So here's an example of how we used a zine on a project,
Right.
and then hyperlink the zine.
Like the precedent research that was done
Yeah. Yeah.
and incorporate that within like the hyperlink, like Thomas was saying.
Yeah.
My other thought was also, if this is in the appendix, maybe turning this section, I'm not sure if that was already a plan, but making it more like visually accessible, like more of like graphic related as well. I think that that would also highlight specific tools better than others if there are ones that you're utilizing more as well.
Thanks, Tessa. We do expect that once our graphic designer gets a hold of this, that it'll look much different and yeah. The farthest he got was this,
Yeah.
really.
No, yeah, I completely understand that. I was just saying as like a recommendation for
And-
the final draft.
With this draft, we do want to convey that this was a done deal and that it was all done and polished because it's not. And so, but we wanted to have something that looks like anyway, yes, we will. Love the suggestion about providing examples and how
I
to
think
use some of
maybe
these
you
tools.
could
Yeah,
refer to it as, like a best practices
yeah,
type of
yeah.
concept of, with regard to each of these component tools.
Can I ask? And this is
Good.
for the public benefit, so I'm not a complete idiot on this, but can I take a step back and ask a much more elemental question? How there are as it says on page 5, the bottom of page 5, 284 municipalities, 7 counties, including additional townships in Grundy and DeKalb County. How does that happen? How does that get determined? I think it would be good for the public to know how you even ended up here. Is this automatic based on the Census Bureau's designation? Is it based on legislation? Because, maybe the folks in DeKalb Township find out the folks in Sandwich and Salmonock are in. Hey, how did they get in and we didn't get in? What determines, what's the process? Or is it legislation? You have to go to Springfield. What determines who is in and who isn't?
I think, and I'll have to confirm that the federal government decides what the urbanized area is and defines then what the boundaries of that urbanized area is. And so,
Census Bureau.
yeah, so it's based on census data.
Thanks.
But let me confirm. Let me add that to my list of things to confirm to you. Yeah. Good question.
But also picking up on what Thomas said, in terms of, it might be helpful as a tool. So somebody who picks us up to see who are the communities, or what are these organizations that we're trying to maintain the linkage with, as opposed to just saying we have X number. What, in other words, so I mean, they an enumeration of what these communities are, or the entities that we're linking to. So somebody who picks this up can see
Ah,
who we were trying to link with.
yeah.
I completely agree. There's awesome features on like ArcGIS story mapping where you can do that. If this is going to be online as well, that could easily be like a clickable link, and then doing some sort of story mapping where you'd like get to know, you'd see visually where the communities are, but then you dive deeper into it and
Okay.
yes, and then also like identifying communities and so forth, different elements there. But ArcGIS story map is great for that.
Cool. So
Yeah, I
people
think that
could
would be
see
great.
themselves in this. They could see, is my community one of those 200?
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
if somebody said, well, am I part of this? So they'd be able to see,
Mhm.
Yep.
am I part of CMAP? Am I part of what is, who is included?
Right.
And visually see, and I'm picking on your idea, a visual map type concept,
Mhm.
then with maybe a click on link to individual communities where people say, okay, this is like a little blurb about,
Exactly.
about each community or each organization that are our partners and so forth.
And if there's anything we do well here at CMAP, it's mapping. Yes.
I have a question about the tools. I mean, it's a very extensive list of tools. And I know it's also mentioned in the document, the need for like flexibility in terms of applying tools to, as they're relevant in a project, but I'm curious, kind of in the research of other MPOs, similar participation plans, like if there's a way to kind of require like X amount of tools employed in a project or prioritize certain tools over others. I mean, for instance, I know like, much more is involved in planning, charrette, for instance, than social media. If there's just some way to kind of, ensure that a sufficient amount of tools would be employed for any given project.
The best tools for any project, the most appropriate tools for any project. So what's not part of this umbrella plan and mentions it, that for every project that CMAP does, a planning project with a local community or a policy development project or a program like for ADA, we develop for each one of those a communications and engagement plan, a strategy that does a number of things. It identifies audiences. So who's our target audience? Who are generally overlooked audiences and what are their barriers to participation? What are the most appropriate tools we can use to reach those audiences and to engage them? So there's a difference between reaching them and then actually engaging them. So you may get a notice to them at a barbershop, but how do you get them to show up at a meeting? What's going to be the enticement to actually come to a meeting? Do you bring it to them? Or so for across the agency in all of our projects, or at least most of them where it's appropriate, we develop a individual for each project, communications and engagement strategy for each one. So that's kind of what you're getting at. So this is more of the big picture, but what we do for each project, we drill down and we figure out it's most important about who are the audiences and what are their barriers to participation, how do you overcome them? And how do you meet them where they are? And so it's going to differ depending on the audience and the tools. So for example, those two planning projects in Logan Square or Avondale, those were much different audiences. And one invited us, made sure we did translation services, interpretation services for the community meetings and for all of our printed materials. So you have to understand the community that you're working with and what their needs are and how best to reach them. But we can't say all that in this kind of more general plan. So that's why the list in the appendix.
But
Yeah.
notwithstanding, are there not principles that should be articulated as part of the public participation? I mean, for example, accessibility, location, access. So, basic, so that if that if you're going to have a meeting, the concept of it should be easily accessible. I mean, that's not going into detail, but that's a principle that should be part of public participation. That if you're going to set something up, it should geographically diverse, locations for bringing people together. So everything's not being done in a loop, so to speak. I mean, everybody can't get to the loop. Or if they're doing things in a certain place for people who can't get out and about, the things that can be done online. I mean, so all those different ways of reaching the people. If I think the concept or the principles should be spelled out as part of the plan.
We did list some principles, but now that I look at it, Mr. Chair, it doesn't seem to, on page 7, it doesn't seem to address explicitly accessibility. It's kind of woven in, but I think maybe it can be more explicit as the accessibility. And then we also, the principles are also included in some of the agency's core values. And then we tried to, at the end, include a list of what makes for effective and meaningful inclusive public engagement on page 13 with a list of some best practices. And that was really intended, the audience there was CMAP staff, so that they think creatively and innovatively about how best to reach audiences where they are. But I agree it can be more explicit about accessibility. Other thoughts?
Just once again, going to the whole concept of putting meat in the bones. When we talk to some best practices,
Mhm.
including a budget with compensation for communities. Well, in terms of having a budget, it should be an understandable budget. It should be a budget, a program budget. So when someone picks up a budget, people can understand what are those programs, a programmatic budget. That basically, then also that explains who are the players that implement various portions of that budget. I think we do a good job with it, going
Yeah.
back to our budget,
Right.
with like the CMAP budget, which I'm familiar with over the years. But that the concept of what should be in a programmatic budget that understands and explains the tentacles of the different things that are being done by the agency or by any of our partners, so that we can understand what they're doing and then who's doing it and who are the and identifying who the players are. So if somebody wants to pick it up and say, well, wait a minute, who do I contact about who's involved in doing such and such? Well, who's the person I should contact? Obviously, I'm not saying that put that in the plan, but the concept of identifying who the contacts are, identifying what the functions are of the different aspects of the programs within the budget.
Thank you. As best we could, even though that's like a moving target sometimes.
Mhm.
Yeah. As agencies change and people come and go.
Another thing I'm curious about that I didn't see really spelled out in the document is like just educating the public on what CMAP is, basically. Like if there's, if that was, any thought about adding that to the document. And, I feel like for the most part, people really don't know what CMAP is. So, that could be maybe a first good step, is some sort of outreach steps, efforts just trying to get people to understand, what CMAP is, what they do, so that when CMAP does go to their community for a planning process, they already kind of understand what it's about, adding credibility to what will actually come out of those types of planning processes.
Kind of the CMAP 101. We worked up some CMAP 101, but honestly, I'm not sure I can explain in an elevator ride what the agency does because it's so complex. The elevator speech or the whatever. Yeah. We are always working to find better ways to describe what the agency does and connect it to people's lives.
It'll be a long elevator ride.
Yeah,
I think,
Yeah, just.
I'm not on that
Thank you,
soon,
Kyle.
but, I'm in my master's program for public policy. And I think any organization looking for a way to fund their cause is actively searching. I'm not saying they would find you and know what you do. That'd be, CMAP 101 would be great on the website, but that's how I found you guys. I was looking to join a citizen advisory group and I found you guys that way. And
Awesome.
so, but I understand what you're saying, but do you think people, when they're searching for opportunity, they're not knowing to look up for us is that what you're saying?
Well,
How did you find CMAP?
oh, well, I'm a planning student, so I know about it through just education and whatnot, but I think people, I feel like would be interested in knowing, any government agency that's spending billions of their, taxpayer dollars, for sure. It's just the fact of it being kind of hidden in the whole bureaucracy, right? And like a lot of government agencies, there's, I imagine, not a lot of funding for publicizing, the efforts. A lot of, the money needs to go literally into, the operations here. But I'm just wondering if, taking that step back of actually trying to educate the public. And again, I'm not sure if other MPOs out there really do these kinds of things, would help in the long run, would help kind of add, recognition, would really kind of add to the participation all along the way throughout, all of CMAP's efforts.
Could I ask a quick question, Kyle? So on page 5 and 6, there's like that brief, outline of kind of what CMAP does within this public participation plan, specifically in the region. But then on the next page, it's also the vision, mission, and core values. What else, like, if looking at this, what else would you highlight aside from this kind of brief breakdown of CMAP? What else would you include?
I think what you brought up about being more visually accessible. I think, we're in a point, especially in the pandemic, when we're doing Zooms and we're doing Teams meetings and Google and everyone, I'm more adept in PowerPoint now because of that. And so I guess more visuals
So
or
like
more graphics,
Yeah.
I think. I
They
think
get a
people
breakdown of
don't
it.
like a lot of black and white anymore, a lot of text. So visually, someone who knows how to engage with graphics, well, I guess he didn't get the chance to. So
Right.
we're going back to that. But I think, yeah, she's right. Some of it's here.
The version you see after the revisions and your contributions will be much different. We do have a great graphic that shows the flow of federal funding, how it gets to CMAP from USDOT to Illinois Department of Transportation to CMAP to the funding programs, just one aspect of it. We have videos we do that kind of share what CMAP is and what but honestly, we're kind of a stealth unit of government, and it's under a lot of people's radar screens because, and Elliot and I have both worked for local government because CMAP doesn't levy taxes. So we don't get, we're not always the target of residents and citizens who complain about services because we don't provide services in the same way that a local municipality or county does. So we are not on the radar screen of a lot of folks. And yet we struggle with overcoming that kind of these days inherent distrust of government too. So to pick up your point, Kyle, it helps us then, it's not building a brand, but it's helping establish trust in this unit of government so that folks do want to get involved and feel as if they're being heard and their contributions count. Yeah.
I love the idea of like a breakdown that you said that you already have prepared of just like, where's the funding coming from? And then with that, you're identifying the funding, but then you're also visually seeing what programs are offered just right on the paper. So I think that that's great.
Well,
Hard to
going back to
simplify
what you
CMAP.
just said, being under the radar, I would venture to say that if you went out to the community and said, well, I'm Bob with CMAP, what's CMAP? I mean, I would venture to say you would be hard pressed to find people in the community who had the foggiest idea of what CMAP is. I mean, the community, obviously there are some, players and certain governmental entities that may know, but I bet there are probably people who are actively involved in government who probably don't even know what CMAP is. But if you go down a few levels below that, probably people have no idea. So I'm thinking if maybe as part of the whole concept of public participation, it's an education process, and maybe there should be something dedicated to. Obviously, it takes money to do it, but or somebody who's willing to, as a philanthropist, to basically contribute to doing it, but some type of public information program. And so that explain, well, what is this? Right. It's sort of like a public information campaign to educate the community at large as to, obviously CMAP has lots of tools that are really tremendous tools for communities and organizations. A lot of people who are out and about, even in the governmental realm, don't even know what it is. And in terms of, and if you're talking about trying to engage the community, well, how would the community even know to engage? Because they don't know what the heck we are. So it's sort of education is, any problem.
Yeah.
Education is a big component part of it, but figuring how to do that in some type of public information program in terms of creating connectedness and understanding.
Yeah. We
You know,
do.
I'm just trying to be, that's pretty general, but.
Yep, we have lots of opportunities to do that. So the last time, well, it's all along actually, but it depends on the audience and it depends on what we have to talk about. So we've been working on the plan of action for regional transit that you heard about at your May meeting, I believe. And that's involved a whole lot of stakeholder connection and getting the word out about what the project is. But for a government entity that doesn't show up on your property tax bills, doesn't pick up your garbage or, provide any kind of regular services, again, we are not on folks' radar screens. We did a big educational campaign, and what comes to mind for me is when we were developing the 2050 plan, the ONTO 2050 plan. And as part of that public development, that's the plan development that stretched over 3 years, we did over 200 workshops with community organizations. And we used those keypads, for polling, the live polling using keypads, kind of old school cool. And one of the questions we asked in all these workshops was, so how many of you have heard of CMAP? And I think at best was 25 to 30% of people in the room at that time, even though we were on their meeting agenda, had even heard of the agency. But we were in community organizations and neighborhood organizations that certainly had no reason to have heard of us.
And that's 25 to 30% of people who are already engaged.
And right, in those
people
meetings.
are Already in the.
And
they're
we
in the
were,
mix.
yeah, we were adding ourselves to existing meeting agendas of neighborhood groups and League of Women Voters and community groups to run this workshop. But it was not many people, 25, 30% had heard of us, doing what it stood for. So we think about kind of some of our target audiences are partners in this, and a lot of them are those 284 municipalities, those elected officials and staff, because those are the ones in the counties who are implementing the recommendations that come out of the agency. They're actually building the transportation projects. CMAP doesn't build anything. That's the counties, the municipalities, the tollway, IDOT, Pace Bus, Metro, so forth, that build things. So anyway, great ideas, great suggestions for this public participation plan. And we are about to begin the public engagement for the next big plan, the next regional plan. So that'll start playing out in 2024, and there will be more public engagement with that effort too.
Other thoughts, questions, ideas?
I've got a lot of notes, and the draft that you saw today is going to look different tomorrow. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Can I
yeah.
ask how well, I haven't been on the website lately. How well, and I was just, looked like I was doodling, but I was thinking out how money flows. And so much of what you all at CMAP have, that people who are really engaged with their own community, but have no idea what's happening past Oak Park, what's happening past Elk Grove Village, right? And with all due respect to professional planners, have no clue how money flows from the federal government and matched with the state, have no idea. And there are varying levels of ability to speak about that even at the county level. But here's the one place where you can sort of like not just map out, geographically, GIS, but literally map out, okay, well, this is how money flows to this specific project, or this is how we blend, federal funds with state funds to do the 606, or, am I?
No, absolutely. That's been our approach. So We've done presentations to a lot of municipalities, knowing it's a village board, village trustees, and whoever shows up at those village meetings. In some places, it's quite a lot of people. And the way we connect what CMAP does to what the folks in the room know is we share with them the precise projects that have had funding that came from CMAP. So in River Grove, we were in River Grove a few years ago and made a presentation and pulled up and showed folks the map of, so you know, this intersection project that got, the intersection that got remediated, and you've got new traffic signals there, and you've got new ramps there. The funding for that intersection, most of it flowed through CMAP to get to River Grove to build that thing. And try to connect people with what they pass by every day with this more esoteric world of federal and state funding formulas. So that's how we try to make the connection, is to show folks this project that you appreciate every day, or this intersection, or this bike path that you really want, that's been in the works. You know, it's been planned for a decade. Well, it's happening next year because it finally bumped to the top of the list, and that funding is coming through CMAP, through our transportation improvement program.
Well, what Thomas, I think, is getting at, though.
Yeah.
Is that's project specific. But the generic
Yeah.
flow. In other words, how does the money, if the federal government out of part of a bill appropriates X amount of money and it comes to the Chicago area, how does it work? Where does it go? In other words, it's part of the public participation should be, I mean, even maybe a flow chart of some sort that shows generically, not project specifically,
Yeah.
how does it all, piece by piece, get down to the bottom,
Get to a
get
municipality
to a
to pay
municipality,
the contractor.
to be able to
build
get
the bridge.
to get the contractors,
Yeah.
I mean, all the way from the pot of money at the top to the contractors at the bottom. I mean, how does it get there?
I think Tessa kind of was in that direction too, with a comment earlier about,
And that's
And- and
that's
that's the-
part of it. I mean,
yeah.
and I think we could use
uh-huh,
graphics as part of that too.
Yeah.
And people like graphics and it's easy to understand as opposed to reading through.
got it.
You can look at a chart, you could say, wait a minute, this is really easy to see. You don't have to read it. You can see it.
We'll send you the graphic that we have right now that kind of shows in just a portion of the federal funding that flows through CMAP to municipalities that manage these buckets of funding. But it's a lot of acronyms, CMAC, TAP, STP.
Hmm.
We'll explain it and put it out in this graphic we've been using so you can see. And maybe there's a place for that in this public participation plan too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was talking too loud earlier, so, yeah, I'd love to see that. I'd love to see that flow. I think that'd be really helpful. I guess I'd like kind of like reassurance of like when people are speaking up, like that feedback that is being given, like who is it going to? I think a lot of people, like I probably don't understand right now, like if I raise my hand at like a board meeting, like who's listening? Is it the municipalities or is it CMAP? Like, where is that feedback like going to? Yeah, I think it'd be helpful for people to know that the feedback that they're giving is like, who's it going to? Yeah.
Right, well, I think there's probably a better way to explain it in this draft. Okay,
Sorry, I turned my mic off. And I'm also curious, because I didn't get a chance to read, I read a lot of this, but didn't go through it with like a fine tooth comb. I'm curious if we have thoughts on how to improve this after the fact. You said
Yeah.
thoughts could be emailed. I'm curious,
Yeah.
where would those go? Those emailed thoughts? Do you? Cool.
Yeah, they'll go to, you can send any comments to me and I will share them with Jane, and that goes for any project. You have comments on anything, I will share it with the folks working on that project.
Okay, great.
committee, you can chime in on anything that CMAP is doing at any time.
Yes, and you can ask questions at any time. I think I've told everybody, like, I'm also your liaison to the agency. If you have questions about anything that's going on, if you read anything on the website, or have a question about any specific project, I can connect you to folks or find those answers for you.
Cool, great. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, maybe. a
I was
motion.
gonna suggest that maybe someone make a motion that we approve the draft subject to incorporation
move.
and revision of items discussed.
I will so move.
Second, a second,
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Thank you.
Like this.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Appreciate all your comments, all your input on this. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Do we have any other business anybody would like to bring up?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I have a couple things. One, the agency has just released our community data snapshots. This is, they were updated and released, I believe, in July. And for all of our 284 municipalities and I believe over 70 Chicago neighborhoods, we now have an updated kind of picture of those communities through its data. We can send you a link to the community data snapshots on our website so that you can pull up your neighborhood, your community, see what changes have happened in the last year, see how your neighborhood or community compares to the county, to the state and so forth. They're really interesting. You can't know a community just from a data snapshot, but it tells you about access to green space, tells you about education levels, tells you about languages spoken at home, tells you about where they commute to and where they commute from in that community. So some really interesting data.
Is that the data hub? Is that what it's listed as?
Different. It's a specific project, a product that we offer, and it's actually one of the most clicked links on our website for these community data snapshots. So it's for all 284 municipalities, including Chicago. And then we break down the Chicago neighborhoods so that you can get this data. And those municipalities rely on it, community organizations do, sometimes nonprofits do because it helps with their grant proposals because we've got all the data, really good data in one place. So might be a useful tool for you in your work too. And the
Okay,
other
I
thing
see
I
it.
want to make sure we thanked Blanca for all her tech support and backup support on the meeting today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, that's all other business I had, in addition to
Anything?
your birthday.
In terms of public comment, I don't see too many members of the public here. But, but I think, well, that goes to, I think, knowledge and awareness that we're even here. And I would suggest that before our next meeting, that there be, not that anybody's gonna see it, or not that, or that anybody's gonna, we don't know who's gonna publish it or do anything with it. But, or who's gonna even read it or even care. But I think we ought to at least try to send out some press releases to local newspapers to saying, okay, there's this organization, the Citizens Advisory Committee of CMAP, this goes to community outreach. Our meeting is such and such, there's an opportunity for you to come and share your thoughts and so forth. And so forth. That we should at least create better awareness so that maybe, maybe we'll have a person or two, or maybe one person. Whether they want to come online or whether they want to come, or whether they want to come in person. And just a suggestion to create the possibility for a public comment. I mean, obviously, I know we've had public comment. There were some regulars at the CMAP meetings over the years. And I assume, we could create a similar situation.
I'll quickly announce that staff didn't receive any comments prior to today's meeting. We do have a member of the public online, so I'll just say if anyone wishes to address the committee, please indicate that. You can raise your hand or send a message in the chat box and I will call on you. So I just wanted to announce that in case our attendee wanted to address the committee. That's it.
Okay. Anybody, as far as our next meeting, it is scheduled for October 10th. We're officially, I will be out of the country at that time. I don't know how many other people are available at that particular meeting because we typically do a checking beforehand. I will, I would ideally like to change it when I can be back, but obviously if somebody can do it in my stead if I'm not here, but if we can, I'd like to explore that possibility of possibly changing the date of the date of the next meeting, even though that's the official approved date.
Yes, I can coordinate with everyone and get folks' schedules and we can adjust that.
Pardon? Anybody else have any comments they would like to share at this time before we close?
Real quick, yeah, if January is when we intend to fully approve the public plan, right? So I'm curious or December. what is tentatively on the agenda for October, or is that decided closer to the date?
Yeah, that'll be decided closer to the meeting date. So agenda is published 1 week before. So there is not an official agenda yet, but we could look at the next draft of the public participation plan potentially as one of the agenda items.
What else would you be interested? We have a stable of experts here on everything CMAP, and we can also bring in folks to
I'd be interested in an update on the transit stuff. and
On
where
the
we are- where we
plan
are
of
with
action
it.
for
I mean,
regional
I think it's
transit.
so important that we pick up from what we did online and maybe get an update on what's happening on the transit stuff.
Sorry, what are you referring to with the, when you say transit stuff? Like,
Well, we did obviously revitalization of transit in the metro region. We had a sort of an overview at that online meeting the last time, and I think CMAP is in the process of putting together a comprehensive report on the revitalization, so to speak, of our transit systems and what can be done, what can't be done, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
And I think it'd be very valuable to have an update of where we are on that project.
Yes, it's the plan of action for regional transit, which is a report that CMAP was tasked with putting together recommendations to address the gap in funding for the transit system.
What's the current timetable on that?
The report is due January 1st, 2024, I believe. And we have the final steering committee coming up in September. So we should have a good update by our next meeting, so we can include that on the agenda.
That's from a timing standpoint, it sounds like it'll be the perfect time to get an update before we come back. Anybody else have any other suggestions before we ask for a motion to adjourn?
sorry, yeah, I have some more questions. When you say the report is due January 1st, 2024, what does that mean exactly? Like it'll be published then, or it's like a plan with working with other stakeholders like state, federal government for funding? I'm curious like what that
Mhm.
means. that
That's
plan.
the deadline for the Illinois General Assembly, which is who tasked CMAP to put together the report. So that's who it's due to at that time, and it'll be approved by our board before that.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
And Aaron, we can include a link to the webpage with a lot more information about this project for you.
I'd love that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, especially
do
for everybody who wasn't here, I mean, for all of us, since a lot of new people. Be the link to the, what we got last time and the link to where we are and so forth.
Yes, I believe I shared the link to the last meeting with everybody and the part information, but if you didn't receive it, I can resend that also and include it in the update email after today with all the other items that we talked about.
Outstanding. Seeing nothing else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. I guess no one will take.
I'll second.
Can we keep going?
Thank you, thank you. All right.